and back in time, eventually they'll get it right. We've always been here on these lands. And I don't buy into the whole Bering Strait thing. Now, maybe there are some indigenous people on America that did, but it might make sense for them to have been people that were somewhere near the Bering Strait, as opposed to some of us way over here on the East Coast. I don't buy into that theory, and neither do any of my family members or tribal members. We believe that if we went on a long journey as part of our creation of who we are and how we came to be here, it'd be in our oral tradition, and it is not. So therefore, we don't buy into that philosophy at all. I will tell you just a little bit about myself. I'm technically an educator, if you want to go on the sort of modern American terms of who you are. I have 2 degrees in education. I was a public school teacher. I founded and ran Nuichuan School at Tamaquag Museum. But first and foremost, I'm Narragansett Niantic, and I was raised that way, and everything I do in my life comes from that viewpoint, that ideology that's been passed down to me from one generation to the next generation. And when I got invited very nicely to come here to your lovely island, people said, well, you know, could you talk a little bit about the Manistee people? And I scratched my head about that a little bit. Then I talked to, you know, my mom and my grandmothers and my aunties, and I said, you know, they want me to talk about the Manistee people, and they keep talking about them like they're some other people. And I'm like, that's not how I've always remembered it being told to me. And they're like, well, that's because that's not how it's been told to you. From our vantage point, the people that came to be the people living on Block Island were Narragansett Niantic people. Just like if you were on the mainland and you lived in the Quanakantog area or the Weekapaug area or the the northwestern part of the state, or we're in Cowisit. You might be called the Cowisit because that's where your village is, but not that you're not part of the greater people, which in this case in the Rhode Island area were Narragansett or Niantic or both. And so that's sort of my philosophy on that. And again, it's from my oral tradition. And as far as I'm concerned, nothing against the scientists of the world. They're trying to find out who we are. We already know who we are. So that's how I come at that. So today, I'm going to share a little bit about who I am as an indigenous person, sort of our relationship to the land, and oh please, anytime you want to say anything, just flag me down, because I can roll sometimes and never stop. But I want to say first, in the modern world, we have to pause and talk about ecology and the connection to the land. There is no such thing as being an indigenous person and not being connected to that land. Everything historically and frankly, as far as I'm concerned, even how we are today, is vitally connected to the land. But certainly, when we didn't have the infusion of modern life, which forces us to go get a day job and go to school and do those things that are taking you external from your personal realm. In our history, everything we did was connected to the land. So our lives are intrinsically involved in the ecology of the earth. And I like to look at it like this. If I was fortunate to have lived, in 1402, I would certainly have certain roles, but they would be all connected to the land. Our home would be connected to the land. We have a beautiful picture here of the type of home that we would have lived in, even here on Block Island. Either a nushquito, which is a longhouse, or a witu, which is a dome-shaped home. This is one that's been built recently. I don't remember what year, 2 years ago maybe. My son, my nephews, and my brother-in-law built this particular nushquito. It's actually an ashway. The importance of it is that even though we don't live in that today, it's important to be connected to our history, our culture, our traditions, and so now today we use those dwellings in ceremony as opposed to using them today to live in. The nushquito, as you see, is made out of bark. It's first bent sapling. covered in mats, bulrush, cattails, corn husk mats that would cause the insulation to be. In the summer months, you'd just have the mats. In the winter months, you'd have the mats underneath and then the bark on top to block from the, the bad weather, the wind, and the wildness that can be. Certainly, I imagine on this island it'd be pretty windy in the wintertime. Us mainlanders, we move inland during the winter months, so you don't have as far to go if you were trying to move inland here as we have, for tribes that are coastal people, but have that woodland environment strongly on, on the, kind of a weird word, but I'll say it again, mainland. What do you guys call it? Over yonder?
Mainland.
You call it mainland?
Yeah.
I know, it sounds funny.
Or off island.
Off island, yeah.
America.
We call it
America, yeah, when you go to America. So, everything that we have, culturally speaking, stems from the land. The foods that we eat, the clothing that we make, traditionally speaking, all the resources for all the materials that you have. So, for example, here, this is a pouch. Very lovely. Had a wampum bead on it, but it broke. This was made for me on my 30th birthday from Kinnet Musitosh, which is a Wampanoag elder. He's since passed away, and I decided to share it in my kit. So I used to always wear it at the powwows, but in other social gatherings, I was a little afraid if I was flopping around, calling the kids on my iPhone, having that in the pouch, text them, come on, it's time for grand entry, that I'd break it. And so I figured I'd put it in the kit and share it with all of you. And since you're grown up, I'll pass it around so that you can take a look of it. It's got a lot of significance. The turtle shell, again, you use everything that you have. Traditionally speaking, you'd eat the meat first, which I've had snapping turtle stew. We had it not too long ago. I think it was last winter even. Very good if you've never had it. In this case, it was used to be a pouch, but often, traditionally, it would also be like the armband, like a shield for a warrior, to name just a couple things. Also, the turtle shell represents the calendar. How many Thanksgivings do you celebrate? Just one. See, I'm so sad for you. Traditionally, we celebrate 13, one for each new moon, and if you went by a lunar calendar, which would make sense, you'd have exactly 13 moons in a year. Instead, we have to learn a little poem, 30 days past September and all that.
Gary Schneider wrote a book called Turtle Island, because that's how the Americas look, right?
I don't know who that person is. So
he's a poet, and he's much into the Native American culture.
Oh, I'm sure. There are other books called 13 Thanksgivings, and certainly we call Mother Earth Turtle Island. It's a very known concept, so I'm not familiar with that particular author.
In the Galapagos, there's numerous tortoises, and they have 13 parts to their shell.
Well, supposedly,
it's a very popular number there.
Right. Well, we're here, it's because of the whole Salem and witch trials and stuff. We've gone crazy about 13. That's probably why we didn't end up with a 13-month calendar or something. But the calendar is important to us, and we still have that, and we still celebrate those 13 Thanksgivings. Today, maybe not quite all 13, but maple sugar Thanksgiving, green corn planting moon, strawberry Thanksgiving, green bean Thanksgiving, green corn Thanksgiving, cranberry Thanksgiving, the Nakomo Thanksgiving, the storytelling moon. That's just a few right off the top of my head that we still regularly do. The harvest Thanksgiving, I didn't say the obvious one. All of those, but it's part of our spirituality, but our spirituality stemmed from our environment. So in another location, they might have still had 13 Thanksgivings, but they'll be called something completely different because of the environment and the resources that are in the environment. One of those moons might be in the long time ago, might have been time to harvest the sweetgrass. In Rhode Island, our sweetgrass populations have dwindled to virtually nothing in the wild. We've actually done some reclamation of that and planted sweetgrass beds to come